Hi everyone, welcome to Brain Boom. Make yourself at home, we're about to find out why the infamous Titanic still remains on the ocean floor. Millions of people around the globe are familiar with the tragic story of the biggest vessel ever, the pinnacle of shipbuilding technologies at the time. Leo DiCaprio movie still remains one of the biggest box office hits, and the story itself bothers people's minds to this day. RMS Titanic was built in 1912 with the intention to create the biggest and fastest ship in the world. The features were so mind-blowing, papers couldn't stop talking about how foolproof this thing was. The first sailing of Titanic occurred in the 10th of November in 1912. From British Harbour to France, then Ireland, with the New York City being the final destination. The journey should have ended on the 16th of April. The captain, Edward Smith, was in charge. 62-year-old sea dog who spent at the helm 40 years of his life. Nobody has seemed to have any kind of doubts about Titanic's sustainability. So, what went wrong? The ship started its journey despite bad weather forecasts. Two anticyclones had merged, causing northwest wind to arise, leading up to big pieces of floating ice in the ocean. Even with all this in account, and with 7 warnings being received, the crew has decided to follow the plan anyway. According to one of survivors, sea waters remained so calm you could see stars in it, and that was the reason why the iceberg came unnoticed. The engines were shut down and the course was changed only 30 seconds before the crash. That helped to escape head-on collision, but the starboat was already damaged. Holds began to drown, and the tragedy became apparent. The crew sent out SOS and started preparing lifeboats. 10 minutes later, they brought passengers out of decks without telling them what's going on, trying to avoid the panic. As a result, many people ignored these orders and stayed at their quarters. First lifeboats were launched later than expected. The crew wasn't experienced enough to prepare them quickly. 20 minutes after the midnight, Titanic broke apart and finally went down. That disaster had claimed nearly 1,517 people. They've tried to recover it, of course. One-way luxury ticket costed nearly $4,350 old dollars, which makes them worthy of $113,000 today. People on board Titanic was far from poverty. Their relatives, as well as survivors, were ready to put their money into raising the ship. The problem was the actual location of the sunken vessel. With all the data on their hands, they couldn't find it. Seemed like the wreckage have shifted and the technologies weren't good enough to relocate it. Only on the 1st of September in 1985, explorer Robert Ballard managed to find Titanic almost 125,000 feet under the sea. He's been searching for it since 1977. As it turned out, remains of the ship became fragile and may collapse if being removed from its position. The ship is doomed to stay down there, and yet they've managed to recover a lot of stuff from it, with the estimated value of $189 million. A lot of jewelry and tableware was auctioned off, like a life vest, sold for $55,000. Steward's watches with the time of wreckage forever frozen on it, sold for $154,000. Violin, which played in the hands of the orchestra musician during the wreckage, sold for $1.5 million. Even a menu from Titanic had its value for $125,000. The ship lay underwater long enough to become a part of the environment. Dozens of fish and invertebrate species belong to its sunken decks nowadays. In 1991, scientists recovered rusted pieces of debris from Titanic in order to apply microbial forensics. As a result, a new, previously unknown bacterium was found. It was named after the legendary vessel itself. The last dive to the wreckage occurred in 2019. Scuba divers reached the Titanic and found out that it has fallen apart dramatically. Sea salt, undertows, and microflora dissolved the last remaining parts of the ship. Maybe a few dozens of years later, the legendary vessel will become a part of history. Now you know the Titanic's story. Like and subscribe to this channel. Our new content is right around the corner. We'll pump your brain up to 11.